What's up, Red Rocks Church? Oh, you guys sound good. You're in a good mood, aren't you? I'm in a good mood too. I'm so glad to be here. Can we have some fun today in church? Is that all right? Have some fun? But can we also get after it just a little bit? Can we do both? Can we have some fun and get after it? All right, let's do that. Let me say hi to all of our locations around Denver. We're so glad to be with you. Both our God Behind Bars campuses. And Brussels, what's up? We love you guys too. Can you guys help me say hello to every campus? Let's pray and let's get after it. God, I thank you that you brought us here for a reason. Whether we're in this room, at another location, listening online, in a car, in the gym, wherever we're at. I pray, God, that you would speak to us right now about some big things that are going on in our lives. Some important things, things that we're dealing with. Some tough things, some struggles that we're going through. And I pray, God, you would also speak to some of us right now about some dreams that you've put in our hearts. And we thank you that you're here with us and that you are speaking to us right now. And we love you in Jesus' name. Amen. Anybody watching March Madness right now? Come on. All right, on the count of three, you yell, who's gonna win? 1, 2, 3. Hey, that was cheating. Somebody waited for everybody to be done and went, Wisconsin. No, not Wisconsin. How about some Jayhawks? Rock Chalk Jayhawk, go KU. I went to the University of Kansas, obviously one of the best schools in the nation. We know that, right? I did not know Jesus at the time, but I did know Eric Parks. Now, if you know Eric Parks, you know that, well, they're similar now maybe, but not very similar then. I can tell you that for sure. I didn't know Jesus, but I knew Eric, and he's a lot more like Jesus these days than he was then. We lived in a fraternity called Phi Kappa Psi. We were the Phi Psis, and the Phi Psis did not like the Pikes. And I don't remember what Pikes stands for. Pi Kappa Dork is what I think it stood for. But the Pikes didn't like the Phi, the Phi Psis didn't like the Pikes, all right? So we're in the Phi Psis. 92 boys living under one roof with no supervision. Like, that should be illegal, honestly. I don't even blame us for most of the stuff we did. I blame the system for putting us in that environment. So 92 guys and a house mom. Okay, she was like 100. She had no clue what we did, okay? So we're in this building, and the fraternity had like twin towers on each side, and then it had one level in the middle, and there was a sleeping dorm on each side of the building. And so I'm in the sleeping dorm because it's 2 a.m., and I'm sleeping, and Parks calls me. You guys know Parks, right? He's one of the directors here at the church, spoke recently, one of my best friends in the world. He calls at 2 a.m., I don't care who you are, don't call me at 2 a.m., right? So I pick up the phone, I'm like, yeah. He's like, Johnson is Parks. I said, I know. He said, I'm with Torso at Village Inn. I said, good for you. Torso is a friend of ours. That was his nickname all through college because he's about 6 inches taller than me and has shorter legs than me. All right, he's all Torso. And so that was his nickname all through college. In fact, we had pledges in the fraternity. They didn't even know his real name. They're like, yes, Brother Torso, you know. So Parks is like, I'm with Torso. We're at Village Inn. I said, I don't care. He said, Johnson, 8 Pikes just walked by our table, and they said, we'll meet you in the parking lot. And they're out there waiting for us now. We can't move. We're stuck. I said, bro, you just called the cavalry. Sit tight. I went over to the sleeping dorm. I flip up all the lights. I mean, all these angry bears waking up. I said, Parks and Torso are fighting the Pikes. We got to go now. Everybody goes, phew. It was like a fire department. Like the alarm went off. Like guys are coming down poles, the whole thing. And one guy opens a window, runs across the roof, opens the window of the other sleeping dorm. Parks and Torso are fighting the Pikes. We got to go now. They're all up. Excuse me, I kid you not, less than 2 minutes. There's about 40 or 50 guys in the back of pickup trucks. All right, it's the University of Kansas. In the back of pickup trucks, half dressed, heading to Village Inn. Oh, it's about to go down. I mean, guys are armed with like bats and golf clubs and fraternity paddles, and one guy had a lamp. Like, it was crazy. Parks and Torso are not about to step outside into the parking lot. They don't know the Calvary's coming. You should have seen the Pikes' faces when we pulled in. But Parks and Torso, before we got there, they're like, no, we're not going out there for that. That's an impossible fight. I can't win that fight. I'm staying in here. I'm not going to touch that. Awkward transition to the Bible. In 1 Samuel chapter 17, the nation of Israel was in the exact same position. Not with the Pikes, with the Philistines. And they're facing a battle that they can't win. Let's read about it. Oh, you want to know what happened in the parking lot, don't you? You want to know? All right, we'll come back to that. 1 Samuel 17, verses 2 and 3. Saul and the Israelites assembled and camped in the valley of Elah and drew up their battle line to meet the Philistines. The Philistines occupied one hill and the Israelites another, with the valley between them. Got the fight size on one side. We got the Pikes on one side. Music starts to swell. It's getting real. Verse 4, I'm reading from the Message, by the way. A giant nearly 10 feet tall, some of you know this story, stepped out from the Philistine line into the open. Goliath from Gath. He had a bronze helmet on his head and was dressed in armor, 126 pounds of it. He wore bronze shin guards and carried a bronze sword. His spear was like a fence rail. The spear tip alone weighed over 15 pounds. His shield bearer walked ahead of him. Can you hear the music? Can you see what's happening? Goliath stood there and called out to the Israelite troops, "Why bother using your whole army? Am I not Philistine enough for you? You're all committed to Saul, aren't you? So pick your best fighter and pit him against me. If he gets the upper hand and kills me, the Philistines will all become your slaves. But if I get the upper hand and kill him, you'll all become our slaves and serve us. I challenge the troops of Israel this day. Give me a man. Let us fight it out together." 8 Pikes just walked by and said, "I'll meet you in the parking lot." Everybody said, Verse 11, when Saul and his troops heard the Philistines' challenge, they were terrified and lost all hope. Verse 24 says this, the Israelites to a man, that means every one of them, fell back the moment they saw the giant, totally frightened. I want you to picture this scene for a second. This giant man, this untouchable soldier, steps out in the middle of the valley and calls out the nation of Israel. And King Saul's there with the whole army. And everybody in the army gets scared to death, becomes completely hopeless in the situation. And everybody in the army does this. I'm not going out there. I'm not going to have anything to do with that. And those of you who've been around the Bible a little bit, you know this story, right? Everybody steps back and one boy steps forward, doesn't he? A guy named David. A kid, a young adult. He steps forward when everybody else goes backwards. And he would be, although a young man in this story, he'll have a whole lot in common with all of us. Because listen, he's a guy who's got some really big dreams for some things he wants to have happen in the future. And we know what that feels like. He's a guy who, he's going, man, I have high hopes and high aspirations and some things I want to accomplish, some God-given dreams. Someone had told him one day you'll be king. So he's already dreaming of some big things in his future. But like us, he also knows what it feels like to have big dreams way out there. But truth be told, look at your life in its current state and go, I'm nowhere near those dreams. I don't know how they're ever going to happen. At this time in his life, he had 3 part-time jobs, super busy, but nowhere near his dreams. He was a part-time musician, a part-time sheep watcher. shepherd, thank you. I like sheep watcher. Part-time musician, part-time shepherd. I feel you. And on this day, part-time sandwich delivery boy Jimmy Johns had just moved to town, and he's bringing sandwiches up to his brothers who are actually old enough and experienced enough to be a part of the battle. He's busy, got all kinds of things going on in life, but he feels a million miles away from some dreams that God's put in his heart. And he shows up this day, and he sees what's happening, and he hears Goliath, and everybody else takes a step back. And out of nowhere, he shows up and takes a step forward. And he goes, I'll fight him. And that's crazy. And word starts to travel. And King Saul finds out. And he says, what? Bring this kid to me. Listen to this conversation. Verses 32 and 33. David said to Saul, let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him. Saul replied, you're not able. That's the voice that we hear in our heads. Sometimes we feel like God calls us to something, and the voice we hear or people around us say it, or Satan wants to whisper it in our ear. You're not able to do what you feel like you're being called to do. He says, you're not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You're only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth. And this is what I want to talk to us about today. And I told you we were going to get after it a little bit. This is what I want to talk to you about. There are some people in life who run from impossible fights, and there are some people that run to them. We're the latter. Let me say that again, and let's get excited about who we're called to be in Christ. Some people run away from impossible fights. Some people run to them. We're the latter. It's who we are. Today, I want to talk to you about who we are as a church family. If you're just visiting, you picked a perfect day because you're going to find out who we think we are in Christ today. I want to talk to you about who we are, what our heritage looks like. Some of you are new to the church. In the last year, about 2,500 more people have started coming on the weekends than did a year ago. So some of you don't know the heritage of Red Rocks Church. Some of you don't know our history. I'm going to share a little bit of that with you today. 12 years ago, when we had our very first service, we started as a team. And today, we run this church as a team. We're all about team. Amen. But before we had a team, there was one guy, one person with his amazing wife and family, moved to Denver. Chad's older brother, some of you know him, Scott Brugman. I call him the Red Rocks Church OG, original gangsta. He felt called to move to Denver to start a church, and everybody said, Scott, don't do it. It's impossible. They called Denver the church planting graveyard. So look, you can't get people in that city to go to church. The weather's too nice. There's too much to do. It's one of the most unchurched cities or unchurched people groups in the country. Like, it's impossible. Don't do it. But see, from the very beginning, we've been a group of people who don't run from impossible. We run to it because we know who fights for us when we run there. So Scott said, no, I'm going to Denver. And so this past week, I texted him and I said, hey, man, I want to talk to our church family about our heritage. I want to remind our church family that we're a group of people that fights impossible fights. It's who we're called to be. Would you remind me of some of the details, some of the things you were doing before the team was in place? And he sent me this text, and I'll read some of it, and you can follow along. Hold on. He said, I love it. But it's almost more like we're looking to pick a fight and then let God fight. But I agree, it's in our blood. As for Denver, I honestly never chose Denver. I heard God call me to Denver the same way I heard him call me to ministry, both times in prayer, and I didn't hear him in my ears, but in every cell in my body. Some of you know what that feels like. Some of you feel right now like God's calling you to something. He's calling you to start something. He's calling you to stop and walk away from something. He's calling you to make a change, to make a move, to get involved in a different way, to up your faith, to increase your game. You know what I'm talking about. You feel like God's calling you to do something, and you're like, I can't really explain it because I didn't hear a voice in my ear. No, you've heard it in every cell of your body because he's our creator and he can communicate to us that way. That's how Scott felt. He said, when I arrived, I didn't know what to do. So I used to count conversations like victories. So I created a 6-question questionnaire that helped me learn about the spiritual climate of the city, but also helped me get conversations started. Clement Park, skate park, the Fillmore before concerts, downtown 16th Street Mall area, skate park on 20th Street. I still have the name of the first 2 people that I led to the Lord in my prayer journal. Red Rocks Church, that's who we are. When you don't know exactly what to do next, and when you're not sure where God's taking you, and when you haven't seen the dream happen yet, you know what we do? We look around right where God has us and we say, I'll just reach out to lost people where I'm at, one person at a time. I'll fight for some people that can't fight for themselves yet. That's who we are. That's our heritage. He said, man, I was fearless back then. But I had nothing to lose because my daddy could whoop their daddy. We dared to fail. I'm telling you, it all has to do with faith. Taking risks that God puts before us leads to great things. He leads us to the cliff and says, jump and I'll change the world. And that's where some of you are at right now. You know with every cell in your body that God's calling you to do something, and you feel like he's brought you to the cliff and he's telling you to jump, and you're worried about not knowing where the landing is, right? I don't know what's going to happen and I don't know how it's going to work out. And God says, do what I'm calling you to do. Jump, I'll change the world through you, and then I'll take care of the landing. That's what Scott was dealing with. He said if we really believe that God can, he makes us prove it. Faith can move mountains. I'm feeling frisky again and ready to pick another fight. I love it. That's who we are, Red Rocks. That's your DNA. It's in your blood. Everybody said it couldn't be done. Everybody said, don't go to Denver. And then we all got together with Scott and joined in on the party. And before we had our first service, people said, don't do it in Denver. You can't do it. It's impossible. Can't lead a church as a team. Doesn't work. It's impossible. We told everybody we were going to start a church and we were going to focus on lost people, and they said, you can't do it. Experts said, you can't do it. You got to start by trying to get other church people to come because they'll pay the bills that way. You can't do a church just reaching out to lost people. It won't sustain itself. It's impossible. You can't start a church in a theme park. That's not cool. That's a cult. It's impossible. But see, from day one, we've been people that we don't run from impossible. We run towards it. Because we know that our God fights for us, right? So we don't run away from impossible. And you don't have to either in your own life. We believe that Jesus meant exactly what he said. In Matthew 19:26, when he said this, with man, yeah, this is impossible. But with God, will you say that with me? All things are possible. Not part of the dreams that he's put in your heart, not just the ones that make sense, not just the ones that everybody else agrees with. Every single dream he's put in your heart is possible. That's not just meant for coffee mugs. That was Jesus talking to us about our life today. Every single thing he's put inside your heart, it is possible. That's why he's calling you to it. Sometimes you just got to jump and say, okay, God, you take care of the landing. We believe there is not a marriage on this planet that God can't mend. That there's not a broken heart that he can't fix. There's not an illness that he can't heal. There's not an addiction that he can't break. There's not a dream that he'll put in somebody's heart that we can't obtain. That verse wasn't meant for coffee mugs. It was meant for our lives. And so I want to ask you, Red Rocks Church today, as individuals, as couples, as families, are you in a battle? Is there something that you're fighting for right now? Something that you're going through right now, and it is a struggle, and it is real. Is there a dream that God has put in your heart, and you feel like he's leading you to the edge of a cliff, and you don't even know where to begin, how to jump, what it looks like, what the landing will be like? This is real. The nation of Israel, they're looking at what seems impossible, and so they all do this. They all step back. They diminish their own abilities and gifts and talents, and they all step back, and one boy steps forward. And I'm reading this story this week, and it's a story that so many of us are familiar with, right? David and Goliath, and David goes in and slingshot and kills the giant and becomes king, and we read the story because we know how it ends. And we read the story and go, well, of course he did, because look what's going to happen. He didn't know what was going to happen. He hadn't read the story. He just stepped up and said, God's calling me to the edge of the cliff. I don't know what the landing's going to look like, but he's calling me to jump. He's calling me to step to impossible, not away from it. And so I'm reading this story this week, and I'm going, God, I don't understand. Like, he was just a kid. How does an entire trained army back up from something and a kid steps forward? And I just felt like God gave me one word: focus. See, if you read this story, David is focused. Saul is focused. Their focus just goes in totally different directions. And we see in 2 verses what King Saul and his army are focused on. Verse 24, whenever the Israelites saw the man, they all fled from him in great fear. Saul's focus was on the situation in front of him. Saul's focus was on the fight itself. We're tempted to do the same thing. We're tempted to look at what we're dealing with and look at the struggle, and all our focus goes there. And if you'll talk to me, I'll tell you all about it, and I'll tell you how bad it is and what's going on and how it's not fair and how it shouldn't have happened. I'll tell you all about the problem because that's where my focus is. David says, look, that's not where my focus is, and if you want, I'll fight this dude. And then we see this. Saul says this. Here it is again, ready? You are not able. Same thing we fight. You are not able to go out against the Philistine and fight him. You're only a young man, and he's been a warrior from his youth. They're focused on the situation, and they're focused on human strength in the situation. That's what they're talking about. That's everything they're looking at. That's everything they're focused on. And here comes this boy, and he says, no disrespect, King. That's just not my focus. You're focused on the situation, and you're focused on your strength. I'm not. I'm not focused on the situation. I'm not focusing on my strength. I'm focusing on the God who sent me to the fight. I'm focusing on the God who's with me and fights for me. That's where I focus. You change your focus, you change the fight. He says, no disrespect, King. I just focus on something different than you do. And see, David had a history of allowing God to fight impossible battles for him. And some of you know this story. And he starts to give Saul the cliff notes. He said, look, one of my jobs, I watch some sheep in our back 40 that belong to my father. And it's not my dream job, and it's not where I see myself. It's not where I want to be, but here's what I do know. God has me here for a reason, so while I'm here, I'm going to take it real serious. And he said, every now and then, one time a lion tried to attack one of my dad's sheep, and I said, no, you don't. Because I know God has me here for a reason. It's not the dream, but I'm going to take this step real serious. And God's power, it overcame me. His spirit, it was in me. It started working through me. And the power of God allowed me to kill the lion. He said one time a bear tried to take one of these sheep. And the power of God worked through me, and his spirit was active in me. And God fighting for me, it allowed me to kill the bear. He said it like this: the Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of the Philistine. See, Saul's focused on the fight. David said, that's just not what I focused on. I focus on the God that sent me to the fight. Here's what he said: you're focused on what's in front of you. I'm focused on who's behind me. It's a whole different way to look at things, isn't it? I'm not focused on what's in front of me. I'm focused on who's behind me. And when you start to understand that who's behind you is just greater than what's in front of you, there's nothing you can't walk into. There's no fight you can't step up to. There's no battle you can't make it through. There's no tragedy you can't overcome. When you understand that who's behind you is just greater than what's in front of you, it changes things. Remember Parks and Torso in Village Inn? Finally, they're not about to step outside because they know it's not a fight they can win. And so they're stuck, they're trapped, they're paralyzed with fear, right? But what they don't know is the Calvary is on the way. 40 to 50 guys in the back of pickup trucks. Some wearing shirts, some not. Some wearing pants, some not. Bats, clubs, one lamp. Like, this is a force to be reckoned with. And we pull into the village inn, and I'm telling you, we start getting out of pickup trucks that looked like ants coming out of an anthill. Like it's an army coming out. And Torso, who's inside, who's scared to death, he sees us show up, and wouldn't you know it, right then he decides, I think now's a good time to walk outside. And he comes busting through the doors with both hands. Boom! Chest high, bowed up. Pikes right here, an army of us right here. And he looks at the pikes and he goes, what's up now? What you gonna do now? See, when you understand that who's behind you is greater than what's in front of you, it changes the way you walk. It changes the way you talk. It changes the way you fight, doesn't it? That's the realization we've got to get to. That's what we got to come to. Greater is he who is within me than he that is in the world. That's not a game, that's real. And that applies to every single one of us. See, here's what David understood that Saul just didn't yet. When I have a miracle working God behind me, it doesn't matter what's in front of me. When I have a miracle working God behind me, it doesn't matter what's in front of me. And some of you need this right now because this is real, isn't it? Some of you are really in a struggle right now. Like there's some relational stuff going on in your life, and it's heartbreaking. Some of you single people, truth is, you get really scared that maybe it won't work out. And maybe the fact that I've been holding out for somebody that's sold out for Jesus, maybe that's not a good idea. And maybe I ought to walk away from this whole trusting God thing and trying to honor God thing, because what if it doesn't work out, and what if I end up single forever? I mean, it's a real fear. I told you we're going to get after it a little bit, right? It's real. There's some marriages right now, and you know the truth is, like, you're scared. And I don't know if we're going to make it. And it's real. Some of you have some real financial stuff going on right now. Some of you have some real health stuff going on right now with you or someone you love. It's real. I know some of your dreams because I've gotten to talk with some of you about them. And I know that there's some of you have dreams in your heart and you go, I don't have a clue how it's going to happen. And I don't seem like I have anything that it takes to accomplish that. Like, this stuff is real, and I want to tell you today, you don't have to step back. You don't have to walk away. You don't have to tuck your tail and run. You don't have to give in to the lies that Satan feeds into your mind that says you're not able, because you are able. You can step up to an impossible fight, not run away from it, because all things are possible through your God. That's where we live. That's the truth. I didn't know if you're going to clap or not. It would change some of your lives if you would start to speak to your situation like David spoke to Goliath. It would change some of your lives if you start to speak to maybe the voices in your head or the haters in your life or Satan himself. If we start to speak to our situation like David talked to Goliath. Think about what you're going through right now and listen to this. Verse 41. The Philistine cursed David by his gods. Come here, he said, and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals. David said to the Philistine, you come against me with a sword and a spear and a javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty. You can't stop me. I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day, the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down, and I'll cut off your head. You know, it's crazy how sometimes, some of you need to know this, sometimes the biggest battles that we have in our life, the thing that we'd never think we're going to make it out of, the addiction that we can't get away from, the battle that we think we're going to lose, sometimes what happens is when you decide, I'll just trust God and fight impossible fights, he completely delivers you from it, and then you get to look back on it one day, and it actually becomes your testimony, and you start telling people, look what God has done, and what Satan thought he was going to take you out with, you bring back and cut his head off with. This very day, I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands. David said, I just focus differently. It's not about my situation. It's not about my strength. It's about the God who sent me to this fight, the God who's with me, and the God who fights for me. And that's the way we got to start seeing it. Red Rocks Church, this is who we are. Every one of us. It's in your blood. It's our heritage. We don't run away from impossible fights. We run to them, and then we fight for people that can't fight for themselves. That's what we do. Read through this story, and you'll see this wasn't David's fight. He didn't have to get involved in this fight. In fact, by getting involved in this fight, he puts all of his own personal dreams for the future at risk. He has his own personal dreams, just like we do. And he had his own real busy personal life, just like we do. But what he understood is, no, I'm called to fight for people who can't fight for themselves. So yeah, I'm not at the dream spot yet, but where I am, God has me for a reason, and the people in my life are there for a reason, and I'll fight for them. Because heaven and hell are real. God and Satan is real. It's not a joke. It's not a game. People's eternities are at stake all around us. Would you be willing, while you're dreaming for your own future and while you're taking care of your own business, would you be willing to start looking around your world and fighting for some people who can't fight for themselves yet? Would you be willing to fight for some people that everybody else said for them to meet God? That's impossible. Would you say in your own mind, I don't run from impossible, I run to it? And I'll pray for that person. I'll love them. I'll serve them. I'll give to them. I'll help them. I won't give up on them because everyone else has. I'll just pray and say, God, you show me. You guide me. I'll share my story. I'll invite him to church. God, guide me on how to help this person the most. Would you start fighting for some people who can't fight for themselves? That's what we do. That's what we've done since day one. It's our heritage. And it doesn't matter what your skill set is, your personality type, your career, your dreams, your age, it doesn't matter. This is what we do. It's who we are. It's in our DNA. It's in our blood. It's in our heritage. And it doesn't just come from Scott, as much as we love and are so appreciative for what Scott got started. It goes way back. Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Jacob, Joshua, Noah, Moses, the Apostle Paul, a bunch of ragtag disciples who decided, I can't see Jesus anymore, and I don't know how this landing's going to work, but I'm going to jump off this cliff because I believe with his spirit working through me, I can change the world. And so can we. Band, you can come back up. I want to end with one scripture. 2 Timothy 1:6. I think this has so much to do with what we go through today, where God has us and what he wants to do through us. He said this, for this reason I remind you to fan into flame the gift of God which is in you. Some of you need to hear this right now. There is so much potential inside of you. You have dealt with self-doubt long enough. You have diminished your own gifts and your own talents long enough. You've gotten on social media, you've looked around at everybody else, and you've felt sorry for yourself because you're not talented like that person, not gifted like that person, not in a situation like that person. Some of you need to hear this. I need to hear this every now and then. Enough's enough. Stop taking a step back and saying, nah, I'm not gifted enough for that. I'm not talented. Yeah, he's put it in my heart, but I couldn't. No, it's time to start stepping forward and saying, I'm just going to trust you with the way you've gifted me, with the way you've talented me, with the dreams you've put in my heart. I want you to take my faith to a whole new level, God. It's not about my situation. Help me to remember that. It's not about my strength, my assessment of my abilities. It's about you who sent me to this fight. Remind me of that. I want to trust you, God. Sometimes we just have to choose. I'm not going to step back anymore. I'm just going to step up. And I'm going to choose to trust you with my life and my calling and my future. Because when we understand there's a miracle working God behind us, Red Rocks Church family, it doesn't matter what's in front of us. We don't run from impossible. We run to it, and we fight for people who can't fight for themselves. Would you guys stand up at every location? We're going to sing a song. And I'm going to ask you, don't go through the motions on this one. Don't just read the words on this one. Don't just let the people next to you worship on this one. If you're on a treadmill listening to this, worship. Just slow it down a notch. Listen, every word of this song, I want you to process it. I want you to think about it. And I want you to start to declare it over your own life and your own situation right now. My faith is going to a new level. I will trust you, God, because you are a miracle working God. And because you are, nothing in my situation is impossible. All right? Let's declare the words of this song. Red Rocks Church family, I love you so much. I believe in you. I believe in the calling that God has on us as a church family. We are going to be a part of change in this world. It starts with us deciding to trust God. Let's worship.